Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm not going to talk about any RC or FPV because I've gotten myself a new Sega Game Gear. Well, it's not entirely new because we all know that the Sega Game Gear was released back in 1991. But it has been my childhood dream to own one of this. It's definitely a joy to be able to hold it in my hand for the first time and to feel what it's like to hold the tiny cartridge. But when I power on the Game Gear, I got a shock because the display quality is so bad. Look how washed out the colors are. And I decided that definitely the LCD has to go and I'm going to replace it with a modern LCD. Alright, let's get started. Alright, now I'm going to open up my Game Gear. First step is to get rid of these battery covers so that they are not in the way. And then I will need to use a Phillips screwdriver for all the screws here. And at the top here there is a game bit screw, which you will need to use a 3.8mm game bit screwdriver, which looks like this. Well, it turns out that the game bit screw here is bigger than 3.8mm, so the game bit screwdriver I have will not fit. I ended up using this standard hex nut wrench here, and it works just fine. Upon opening the case, the first thing I noticed is there are a bunch of wires at the top which are holding the components together. So I'm going to try to unplug these cables so that it's easier to work with. Alright, this is the last one and they are all separated. Okay, finally I can remove this piece here and start working on this one. Now I'm trying to figure out which version of the PCB I have in this Game Gear. It says here made in Taiwan and it's the 8379024. Okay, 8379024, so it's this one. So my Game Gear is the 1 ASIC PCB instead of the other version, which is the 2 ASIC. So I will no longer need these instructions. I use this one instead. Next step is to remove the board from the case, and to do that, remove every single screw you can find on the board. Total 12 of them. And then you should be able to take the board out of the case like so. Okay, we can put this away for now and be very careful with this thing here. Now, according to the instructions, there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm going to jump straight to step number 5 to remove the LCD. And it says here to peel off the ribbon carefully from the Game Gear PCB like tape. I guess it's referring to this one here. Alright, that's done, and I messed up quite a bit. As you can see, the ribbon doesn't look good. The contact points on the Game Gear board look okay, so I think the mess on the ribbon should not matter. Now, this modification involves a lot of challenge, and the challenge mainly lies with how tiny the components are that you're going to remove. Like, for example, this is the R44, which stated on the instructions that you have to remove. And the way I do it is using a very sharp pen knife like this, and I cut one side of the tabs where the resistor is soldered on, like so. Okay, so you can see that this part of the joint that is soldered has been removed, and all we are left with is the other side, which you then use a very hot soldering iron to heat it and at the same time remove it with a pair of pincers. So I get the pincers, have a tight grip on the resistor like so, and then heat it up, and you can remove it. There you go. Because you don't want to risk damaging your Game Gear, you want to go slow and remove each component carefully. I've removed the 9 resistors, the L2 coil, the 3 transistors, and the 2 capacitors. Here are the 9 resistors removed, the 3 transistors, and 2 capacitors as well as the L2 coil. In this shot you could see the locations of the 9 resistors, the 2 capacitors, and the coil that were removed from the Game Gear board. Next, on to step number 6, remove middle plastic screw mounting of the upper housing. On my Game Gear unit there's no upper screw or anything like that, so I'm going to skip that step and go to step 7, which is to remove the lamp and fuses FU1 and 2. So to remove the lamp, I will have to remove the contacts here and here. To see the joints of FU1 and FU2 at the back side of the PCB, basically they are these ones here. And the way I remove it is to use a soldering iron to heat it up until it's in liquefied form. And while it's still in its liquefied form, I use this suction tool to suck it up like so. Basically this is the same trick that I've used to remove the capacitors. This is a pretty stubborn joint. Even I try to remove as much of the soldered flux from the joints earlier on with the suction tool, still very stubborn, so I just have to heat it up and pull out the fuse like so. There you go. There you go. Alright, RAM is out. FU1 and FU2. Well, if removing these micro components from the Game Gear board isn't difficult enough for you, Step 8 and Step 9 are even more challenging. Step 8 states that we have to replace resistor 24 with R30. So basically you have to remove the R24, which is here, and then remove R30, which is here, and use this R30 to install it in the spot here where R24 is. Also, next step is replace R25 with the 200 ohms resistor. So that means you have to remove R25 as well, and then install the 200 ohms resistor which is provided. This will be quite tough because you not only have to remove the resistor, you have to make sure that you do not damage the PCB trace on the board. And the next step would be to replace 2 capacitors, C39 and C40, with 10 picofarad capacitors which are provided. Now C39 and C40 are here, C39 and C40, and these are not the big capacitors, these are the micro ones. So again, this is very difficult. You have to remove these two and then replace them with the micro capacitors which are provided. Now in the back of hardware provided, you will not only have the VGA connector, you will also notice these two micro components. As it's not labeled, well, they don't have to, because the one with a pair would be the capacitor, and the single one would be the resistor, which is the 200 ohms resistor to replace R25, and this two is to replace C39 and C40 as mentioned. As for R30, I've removed it here, and basically I put it on a piece of sticky tape so that I do not lose it. In this shot, you could see the locations of the two resistors and the two micro capacitors that were removed from the GameGear board. Okay, so these are done. Basically the two 10 picofarad capacitor to replace C39 and C40. Next would be to install the 200 ohms for the R25 spot, and then reuse the R30 for the R24 spot here. Alright, this is how it looks like. I have the 200 ohms resistor installed here and the R30 installed here. Basically, at this stage, we have completed the most difficult part of the modification. After the next step, looks like we have arrived at the last step on this page, that is to replace R13 to R16 with 0 ohm bridge. So these are the bunch of resistors at the bottom right, which are these ones here, these four. I've shot R13, R14, R15 and R16 without removing the resistor. Actually, before we are done with this page, there's one last step. It says to check the 5V with a voltmeter at VCC and ground of the GameGear. If voltage exceeds 5.45 volts, fix the GameGear. Otherwise, the mod will be damaged. Alright, so let's do that. So VCC is here. VCC. And ground is here. 5.06 volts. That is good. Alright, now we are on page 2, and it says here, first solder one wire to VCC of the GameGear mod and one wire to ground of the GameGear mod. So basically we solder the pair of power wires to the GameGear mod unit, and then we slide the GameGear mod unit onto the GameGear PCB like so, and then we solder the two ends to the GameGear PCB. It's always a good idea to tin all the solder pads. So you can see I have all these shiny silvery joints which I have tin with solder. These two will be where the VCC and ground wires are going to get soldered to. Alright, now I'm trying to position the black wire facing downwards, which is where I want the wires to be. And I'm going to just quickly solder the end. There you go. I've already soldered the red one earlier, and now we have the ground and VCC. But the nice thing about this GameGear mod is the designer or the creator of this mod actually thought out all the problems that you will run into. And as you can see here, there are tiny spaces, and these spaces actually has the exact thickness of this PCB board here. So that allows you to slide the PCB board of the GameGear into the recession between the LCD panel and the GameGear Mod PCB. All I need to do is to push this down, push this to the left in this video gradually, trying to get both sides aligned. Alright, here's a better view of how it's like when the holes are lined up. So you can see this hole here is exactly lined up, and same goes for the one on the right here. A pair of holes front and back are perfectly lined up, and then it should be perfectly centered. After applying the solder, it looks like this. You can see quite a fair amount of solder used here on the right, and as well as on the left. I think that should be enough to hold the GameGear mod in place. Now let's not forget the two wire ends, VCC and ground, need to go to the VCC and ground on the GameGear board, which is here at the back. Okay, that's done. Notice the ground make contact with two pins. That's okay because those two pins that you see are both ground. Next step would be to solder one wire from T10 to the lower pad of R23. So from here, T10 to R23. Alright, done. See that black little wire? Happy with that. Next step, solder one wire from CLK 32 MHz of the GameGear mod to FB1 on the GameGear PCB. So solder one wire from this tab here to CLK 32 MHz, which is CLK 32 MHz. Okay, the middle solder pad. So this one here. That's not too far. So from this point to FB1 here. Alright, done. See the red wire. Happy with that. Next step, solder one wire from GGSMS of the GameGear mod to pin 42 of the GameGear card slot. Pin 42 of the GameGear card slot. That's interesting. So first of all, GGSMS would be the third solder pad on the GameGear mod, which would be this one here, the third one. Pin 42 is the second one. Pin 1, pin 2. So pin 2. Alright, it's done. From GGSMS here to pin 2, which is here. Next step is to solder pin 1 of the thumb wheel to VCC on the GameGear board. This one here. First pin, I believe. And then to VCC this point again. Alright, it's done from pin 1 of the thumb wheel to VCC here. And I did avoid the standoff. Next step is to solder pin 3 of the thumb wheel to ground on the GameGear board. Alright, it's done. Pin 3 of the thumb wheel to ground of the GameGear board. After the next step, if you don't want to install the VGA connector, you can leave the backlight wire. Otherwise, solder one wire from the backlight of the GameGear mod to pin 2 of the thumb wheel. Okay, I do want to have the VGA connector, so I'm going to solder pin 2 of the thumb wheel to backlight of the GameGear mod. I know where pin 2 of the thumb wheel is, but I do not know where is the backlight of the GameGear mod. Backlight is here, so it's above the CLK 32 MHz, which is the one here, first one here. So that's backlight. Okay, that's done from the backlight of the GameGear mod here all the way to pin 2 of the thumb wheel. Besides having one wire from the backlight to pin 2 of the thumb wheel, which we have done, we need another wire from C-Sync of the GameGear mod to T2 of the GameGear PCB. So T2 of the GameGear PCB is here, T2. besides this circular patch. That's T2 right there. This one is C-Sync. This one right here will be C-Sync. Alright, that's done from T2 to C-Sync right here. Next step would be to solder 3 wires from butt 1, 2 and 3 of the GameGear mod to butt 1, 2 and 3 of the GameGear board. Now butt 1, 2 and 3 of the GameGear mod is easy. They are right here, 1, 2 and 3, which are these 3, 1, 2 and 3. But the butt 1, 2 and 3 on the GameGear board will be tricky because they are all over the place. So butt 1 is actually a left tab of C37, butt 2 is actually the right tab of capacitor C38, and butt 3 would be the bottom tab of C36. Okay, it's all done up. Basically the 3 capacitors legs, respective legs to butt 1, 2 and 3 on the GameGear mod, as you can see here. Down to the last step. Okay, to solder 6 wires from the old LCD ribbon, I believe is referring to the joints where the old ribbon is attached to. CL2, D1, D0, DW, D2, D3 to CL2, D1, D0, DW, D2 and D3 of the GameGear mod. Counting from the left and look for all this solder joint number 9, 16, 18, 20, 39, 57 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yep, 6 of them, and attach wires to these positions and have their ends hooked up to the GameGear mod. 6 tabs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The other ones over here. And finally, all 6 wires are done. That took forever. And on the back side, 6 wires go to the GameGear mod right here. The mod is almost done. At this stage, all that's left to do is to hook up the VGA connector. These metal tongs are getting in the way, so I'm removing this whole metal plate. It seems that this metal plate provides some kind of structural support here. So we still need the metal plate though, and what I'm going to do is to remove these metal tongs. It's easy to remove the metal tabs. Just bend them back and forth several times until they break. Here's how it looks like with the tabs removed. So now there's nothing that will get in the way. Now we need to cut a hole for the VGA connector. Basically it's the bottom of the GameGear. So this is halfway done. Basically the way to do it is you use the trimmer tool like this one and you start the grind from the outside like so, and you will find that it only cuts halfway through, and then you flip it over to the inside and carefully grind this way, sorry, this way and this way. So once the two half depths meet each other, it will be almost broken like what I have here, and I can then snap off the plastic. At this point it will be good to solder your VGA connector. Refer to the top diagram connector inside and have the connector inside facing you, and then solder all the wires, red, green, blue, followed by ground for 6, 7, 8. 13 would be H-Sync and 14 would be V-Sync. So basically I use different colored wires. I followed the schematic red, green, blue for the first 3 pins, and black wire for pins 6, 7 and 8. And lastly for the pin 13 heatsink I'm using white, and for V-Sync pin 14 I'm using yellow. Do not solder the ends of the VGA connector to the GameGear mod just yet. The reason is because you need to make sure that everything fits together. Remember the hole that we cut out just now? This hole is not only for this connector, in fact it has to be bigger than this connector because the hole has to be big enough for the male connector which comes from your monitor. So put together the GameGear cases and make sure the VGA connector from your monitor is able to slot into the hole that you cut out. If that's possible, then you are almost there. Now when I lift up the top half, you can see the VGA connector from monitor sitting right there, and we have the VGA connector, the female one, that we're going to solder to the GameGear mod. Now we need to position this such that both connectors are in between the recession that we cut out, like so. And then we do the test again by assembling the two cases, making sure that the case could fit together with the connectors connected. So once again, check that the case is able to assemble back. Yep, looks good. So the last step will be, not the last step, but the next step will be to apply hot glue to our connector here and let it set. And then we will have the VGA connector at its best position that will allow you to insert the VGA connector properly. Here's a close-up of the VGA connector. You can see how much hot glue I've used to secure it in place. Alright, that's done. All the colored wires are soldered to the VGA connector. Before assembly, I took the opportunity to clean up the contacts, and I used black tape to tidy up some of the wires. The GameGear mod is complete with the MagWheel, replacement LCD, and the VGA output. Now for the moment of truth, I'm gonna power on. Yes, it works. Look at that. This is really clear graphics. Image quality is so clear. The richness of the color is amazing. Let me try the VGA out by turning the backlight. So dim down the backlight. Whoa! It works. It's so cool. I'm going to turn down the volume. Oh, this is amazing. All the hard work is worth it. Try to throw a fireball. Yep, works. Alright, now I'm going to try Sega Master System. This is the Golden Axe, original Sega Master System. Let's hope this works. The graphics is so much better than before. See, I can tilt the screen in any direction and it's still clear. This is so much better. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoy watching the build, although it was awfully long. And if you do like the LCD replacement mod, go get the Magwell LCD kit. And it's worth it, although the steps are quite tedious. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.